Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Battle Ready. Thanks for joining us again. We've been talking for the past hour with Isht Vatsa, an immigration attorney out of Miami, sharing so much great information on how an individual can, meet with him, have a consultation, and him guide them through the process based on what their needs are. Ish, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks again for having me, Rick.
And in in our break earlier, you mentioned of how employers would benefit knowing the process and how to go about hiring
Yeah,
people. Let's talk about
yeah.
that.
Yeah, sure. So employers, Rick, have specific needs, right? Sometimes they need tradespeople, sometimes they need specialized workers. Sometimes they need highly specialized workers in the equipment or technologies that those professionals are specialized in, right? And then each of these goals kind of has an immigration solution tied to it, right? So it's really about reaching out to immigration counsel, trying to articulate your need well, and then working with counsel to fill that need, right? When it comes to deciding which visa type to pursue or which avenue to pursue for bringing workers here into the United States.
So if an individual is or a company is getting ready to, attempt that,
Mhm.
what kind of outline would you tell them? How would they go about starting it? I mean, what would they do?
Well, the first thing that I would say is forecast well, right? Because these visa types take time. I've been approached by employers and they'll say, "Oh, we're ready to add X number of workers this March," right? And I'll say, "Guys, it's too tight. It's too tight of a time window," right?
Mm,
So for your foreign workers, right? Because for any business, it's hard to forecast needs, right? But
sure.
you really want to forecast as well as you can as far in advance for the needs that you will have, right? And then to be able to execute on that. So I would say give yourselves like, two, if possible, 2.5 year time window to really forecast, bringing those foreign workers into the U.S. business, and then, working with counsel to kind of lay down the roadmap. That way, there's no surprises, for you. There's no surprises for counsel, and of course there's no surprises for that worker, right? And ultimately, because transitioning workers into the United States can be difficult, you're also trying to minimize the friction of that process, and I think by forecasting that far in advance, you're able to minimize that friction overall.
So, what is some of the biggest challenge with forecasting? Maybe one of the speed bumps that they uh, encounter. And I think I'm going to ask you this. Is cost ever a big deal to the employers?
Yeah, of course. Because I mean, there are legal fees involved and there's government filing fees for these processes. Sometimes there's relocation costs, right? Which, employers bear over employees. So those are all considerations, right? But if an individual is abroad and they're so highly specialized that there really is no substitute here in the US, right? Then that's really where, they would start looking at immigration counsel to fill those needs.
Okay, and so let's say they're partially the way through it, and then maybe there's some change in the need or change in um, the status of the individual they're trying to help or pursue. What some suggestions with that, or is there none?
Yeah, so I mean, usually it's never something um beyond which, like, council can't pivot, right? Because even if there's changing conditions on the ground, and sometimes there's changes in the law, right? But that's why you want to forecast as far out as you can so that you anticipate those changes as you move further down, right? It's like, you want to, I think, as counsel, you want to work with your clients across all 100 of those yards, right? You don't want to just kind of come in there when everyone's already in the red zone, right? To try to
Sure.
pick up the pieces.
So is there any, okay, so I don't want to say shortcut, but I'm going to ask, is there a shortcut? So is there a way
Well,
to get somebody
yeah,
here to
yeah,
work at the same time?
that's a fair question, Ricky. I mean, I know that a lot of your audience is in Houston. For Mexican and Canadian nationals, right? There is the treaty national visa. Now, that's by no means a shortcut, but there's no year allotment, right, on that visa type like there is
Sure.
for the H-1B, and there's no requirement for the professional to have worked for a US subsidiary or parent or affiliated company for 1 full year prior to immigration, like there is for the L1, right? So that's one where individuals can act more quickly based on their needs, right? If someone is already operating an E2 business here, so say you're an immigrant, you came here, you're already operating an E2 business, and now you need to bring on E2 employees, and they're also, from the same country that you're from, you're able to bring on those employees through the E2 employee process, and there's no 1 year bar like there is for the L1, or there's no lottery wait like there is for the H-1B for that type either, right? So you're trying to, I think if timing is your goal, you're trying to see if you're eligible, right, to move around those bureaucratic hurdles, right, that the H and the L present. But those are limited to individuals. For example, Mexican Canadian nationals when it comes to TN, specifically the treaty national visa, right, which stems from the USMCA agreement, or it is limited to E2 country nationals because those stem from the treaty between the US and those E2 countries.
So is there any country that you've been working with a lot more often than other right now, or not really?
Well, a lot of my clients are Latino because I am based here in Miami. So, and then
Sure.
I have a lot of clients out there in Houston as well. So all across Latam, it's always interesting to see country conditions develop there as well. And to kind of work with clients in terms of shifting their needs, and their lives really, from these countries across Latam into the United States.
Well, I know that you were mentioning earlier that you work with a lot of oil and gas here in Houston.
Yeah.
And I've been here now probably around 20 years, and this thing has just continued to grow. It's
Hmm.
such a melting pot. I almost don't think there's a country that's not, you know, I have somebody identify with them in the Houston proper. It's like 65 miles from one area to the other, right?
Yeah, it's a
And
huge
just amazing.
city.
Um, do you ever get a chance to come this way?
Yeah, I actually was in a wedding in Houston about 2 years ago, and you're right, it is a huge city, and it does get hot in August, as we also found out. So,
Right?
and that's something coming from a Miami person, right? So it's even hotter out there. But yeah, I mean, I was just impressed by the amount of like industrial work that we saw in and around Houston. I mean, it's truly a large and bustling city. And it is, yeah, it seemed like it would take like an hour to an hour and a half to just get from one location to another. And there wasn't even any traffic, which was just, astounding. Just the size of the city is impressive.
No, that like, I think we talked earlier, Houston's an hour from Houston, right? No matter where you're going. And
Yeah.
that's why when I used to work up north, they're like, "Oh man, it's gonna take you 20 minutes to get there." I'm like, "Okay, that's no big deal." They're like,
Right.
"What? That's
Right.
like killer, right?" They're like,
Yeah.
"No, I don't want to
Yeah.
do that." I'm like, "You down here, you need to get you an audio book in, some self-learning, something going to make the travel around the city."
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so tell me some what else is kind of out there in the immigration world that's been hot and heavy lately.
Well, there are a lot of policy changes that are coming out from the Trump administration. A lot of those policy changes are then getting challenged in court. So it's very messy and it's very politically active right now. It's kind of a quote quote hot space. So
Sure.
it's very important for individuals who may be impacted to really keep a close eye on the news, right? Which I mean, I completely understand is anxiety provoking and difficult at times, but it's important to be informed, right? And that may also really highlight the importance of having value, like strong immigration counsel in your corner, because immigration counsel, of course, as a fiduciary responsibility to all of their clients, are looking at all of these changes. And the immigration law community, just immigration lawyers as a community, it's a really great community to be a part of, because we're constantly apprising each other of changes and developments, just because there's so many, and they sometimes are monumental. So it's just a very active space right now with tons of moving pieces.
Okay, so again, tell us how to get a hold of you.
Yeah, sure, Ricky. So the best way to reach me is to email me at info@eoimmigration.com. If someone wants to reach me, they could also just go to my website, eoimmigration.com, and then just click schedule a consultation, fill out a pretty quick form, and I'm happy to address questions and schedule a consultation with them.
Perfect. Is there anything else you want to close with and share with the audience?
Yeah, the barbecue is really good in Houston.
There it is, right?
Yeah.
But hey, Miami has some good food too. A
Oh
lot of
yeah,
the
yeah,
Cuban and
incredible,
Haitian food, man. I had a
incredible.
great time
Yeah,
down there.
yeah, yeah.
Well, I've totally enjoyed having you on the show today. Yeah, everybody else, thanks so much for joining us today with Isht Vatsa out of Miami and with immigration law. Reach out to him if you have any questions, and we'll see you next time. Have a great day.
This has been a Now Media Networks feature presentation. All rights reserved.